It is.
Here we go.
We are ready.
All right, good evening. We'll call the special meeting of the Board of Directors for May 21st, 2026, to order at 4:02. We can have roll call.
Director Smith. Here. Director Rogers. Here. Director Perez Gill.
Here.
Director Logston. Director Delara. Here. Vice President Rodriguez.
Here.
President Baraka.
Was trying to figure out where that sound is coming from.
Was she online?
She's going to join us. She said maybe she's running behind.
Oh, if that's what it is for air, okay. It's an air conditioner.
Okay, so we're still in the meeting room.
So at this time, we'll, if you could please stand for the pledge of allegiance. Ready, begin.
I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, abstentions? All right, we'll move on to item number D, which is public comment. At this time, comments from the audience may be made on items not listed on the agenda that are of public interest and within the subject matter jurisdiction of the district. The board has a policy of limiting speakers to no more than 3 minutes. The board cannot take action on items not listed on the agenda. Public input will be offered on agenda items when they come up for discussion and or action. Do we have any public comment online?
Councilmember Pye, did you have any public comments? I guess not.
No. No.
Thank you.
All right, not seeing any public comments, we'll move on to item E, governance workshop. And we'll introduce Larry.
Thank you.
Larry, share your screen here. Is it here? Where did we go before? Oh, we can share this and then we can, your screen, where for the file on.
Pink.
Yes.
Here we go. That is. And there we go. Okay, so on
Okay. Great. All right. Well, thank you for once again being here to talk about preparations for leading this organization into the future. I've been privileged to have viewed every single one of your strategic planning sessions, every one of your activate inclusion sessions, every one of your board meetings for the last several months, because I wanted to make sure that I was as much in tune as I could possibly be with everything that you were doing and thinking about as you move forward as a board in guiding this organization forward into the future. You certainly have a huge challenge ahead of you because a lot's going to change. This strategic plan that you have recently adopted is one of the best that I've ever seen. And I know you have all said the same thing, those of you who have done strategic plans yourselves in your own organizations. This is going to be a real challenge, I think, for all of you, because you're going to have to think differently. You're going to have to organize differently. You're going to have to move forward into the future, I think, a lot differently than you have been recently. And you're really at a pivotal point, I think, right now, as you think about your role as governing board leaders in taking this organization into the future. You really have a roadmap right now for where to go, courtesy of Sowen. A very clear, focused, precise roadmap for the next 5 years. It will also guide you beyond 5 years and further into the future. How you provide the kind of leadership for your executive team and for the employees in the organization will say a lot about the quality of your and the effectiveness of your leadership moving forward. So that's what I'm going to talk about tonight, because your job really is to navigate this organization into the future. What is that called?
Do you have a toggle that's in there? To move it, like a toggle in order to. How do you get it to work? Do you have is it just built in like a Mac? Or maybe go down?
Okay. Genius here. It's going to make everything work. Sowen, in their final strategic report, I think said something really important. Decisions made in the coming years will shape the district's capacity decades from now, balancing near-term grant making with long-term reserves, evaluating prudent investment strategies, and maintaining operational strength are all part of ensuring that the district and foundation remains a stable and impactful institution long after the lease concludes. So they're really, in that statement, I think, talking about not only the next 5 years, but way beyond the next 5 years as well. I don't know why this isn't working. I apologize. Okay, so let me ask you a question or two or three. What do you think you have learned personally as a board member or board members about yourselves and about your preparation to lead this organization forward with the foundation of the strategic plan as your guidepost, as your true north? What have you learned about yourselves? Carol.
Well, I think that one of the most valuable lessons that I participated in was the activities with Activate Inclusion, where we talked about our differences in terms of decision making and understanding of the different roles and how we interact with each other and how we with our decision making process. So I think that was really valuable to me. You know, I'm the one that raises my hand and let's do it. You do it now, and then I hear from my other comrades that say, well, I like to think about things in detail first before I make a decision. So in terms of achieving this strategic plan, I think that we need to have, our divergences come together and come to a consensus and agreement.
Okay, so greater collaboration, cohesion, consensus building,
Mhm.
thoughtfulness,
Mhm.
moving forward in
Mhm.
making decisions.
Mhm.
Okay. Anybody else? Anything else that you've learned as you've gone through this process about yourselves as you think about what is going to be necessary to effectively lead the organization moving forward?
I'll go.
Okay, Director Smith.
Yeah, I would agree. That was my initial thought as well with the DISC. I thought it was extremely helpful. And I think that as we learned more about, how and why, based off our responses, we fell into a particular area, not just about, how individually, right, where our strengths tend toward, but also like there were sections on there that talked about like how can you work best with the different, personality types. And so most of us landed, I think, in S or C, and so, but then there was also a really helpful part I found where it said, okay, well, what are some things you need to look out for when it comes to like conflict? How you deal with conflict, do you avoid it? Or, it's kind of like plow through everybody trying to make a point. And so I found that very useful, and I tend to consider that now as we're having like our interactions and whatnot, like, okay, I can see it kind of playing out, but also can take that into account for like, okay, so we're not all going to agree, but it's all of these various strengths together that make us, and will make us very successful.
I think that'll be really important because you're going to have a lot of key decisions to make, and it's going to require a lot of, as Carol said, and as you just said, it's going to require a lot of thoughtful, not only decision making, but dialogue and directive decision making. So you're going to have to be able to coalesce yourselves and be willing to challenge one another constructively, engage in a lot of deliberative dialogue respectfully, and always be focused on the bigger things, because one of the dangers is to get involved in the little stuff, and the big stuff is what boards really need to excel at in order to lead things forward into the future. You're going to have a lot of staff people focusing on operational details. Your job is to stay out of operational details and focus on big picture. Where are we going? How are we getting there? How do we know we're getting there? What do the metrics tell us that we're doing? And if the metrics aren't leading us in the direction that we think we need to be going in, then what are we going to do? Anybody else? Yes.
So, I would, agree with both board members, but, I think what I want to point out is, what I learned about myself is that I need to be, better at communicating, to avoid getting into operations. Because I need to be able to get the information that I need to be able to make better decisions. But I need information so that staff doesn't feel like if I am going to be somehow, stepping on their toes or anything. So being able to communicate how to do that better. And that's one thing. The other thing is how to really understand and live the initiatives that we have adopted, to make sure that I stay focused on those. Because the disc has showed me that I'm very emotional, that I'm that I lead a lot of times with my heart. And so I need to make sure that I tend to sometimes do that. And I need to make sure that I just, especially at the very beginning when I'm kind of still practicing to get better at doing that. So how I can prepare myself to be able to not give headaches to, our leadership team by trying to deviate from the strategic initiatives to make our plan actually give it a chance to work and to. So I think those two things I would have to say is how to communicate better with our team to ensure that I have the information that I need to act on, but not stepping on toes. And the second is how to stay very clear and focus on the strategic plan to ensure that I stay on the path.
Yeah, very good insights. Vice President Rodriguez, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, I'll do that, and I don't want to sound conceited here at all. What this process has really shown me specifically on the strategic plan is just really utilizing my past knowledge and experience in whether it's financial planning, being a data geek, a real emphasis that I've had on social determinants of health over the last 10 years, 15 years. That really highlighted the importance of all those in developing the strategic plan. So it really, because you asked about what you learned about yourselves, and it's really, I learned that all this stuff that I've done for many decades now has really led to a point where I see this, as I've said many times, as one of the best strategic plans that I've ever seen. And then one that's not just focused on the 5 years, but really is focused on the next 50 to 100 years, to be honest with you.
Director Perez-Gill, any thoughts?
I agree with everybody else what they said. I also learned that we need to follow right policy and follow direction that we decided to that we decided we wanted to follow in order for this to be successful.
So follow the mission, follow the vision, follow the plan, be consistent in the approach. Okay. I have a few other questions that I wanted to pose to you. What do you think is most transformative about strategic plan for the Desert Healthcare District? You know how you've been going about your work for years and years and years. With this new plan, what is most transformative in your mind?
I'll start with this one, and I think it's the funding plan, and how we've been deliberative on, especially in the first year with the $100 million allocation, is not spending that all at once, but is really looking at how we create a foundation. And I mean, foundation like foundation, but also somewhat of a capital account, really. So that there is long-term sustainability even after the 30 years. I think that's one of the most transformative things in the plan to me.
Okay, others?
Well, tied to that, I think I would point out the fact that even though we have used evaluation to be able to determine effectiveness and impact, we've used that in the past, but I don't think I have used it as what we plan on doing it, to give it even greater emphasis, to be able to use our funding in a way that we could actually drive the funding. So I think the high emphasis that we're placing evaluation is, I think that's very transformative.
Okay, so when you say on evaluation, are you talking about the pillar metrics?
Yes, we are actually agreed that we're going to be bringing in additional expertise in the area to be able to have that in-house, and how that's going to be able to be helping us to make better decisions. So I think that part of evaluation or expertise on the data and how we evaluate programs. So.
Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
I think, one of the ideas that I focused on is the need for strategic thinking and being creative, looking outside the box, the areas that we really haven't delved into in the past.
That kind of gets at the next point. What do you think is the board's primary role in moving this plan forward?
Well, I like your number 7 at the end of your report here, the systems thinking, looking at different factors, and think that avoiding silo thinking. I like that the best.
I'm glad you read the report. Thank you.
I think it's to be able to continue to see what our goal is, to make sure that we are still on the right track to achieve that goal. And if we have to look at what are the resources to make that happen, if we have to make some changes, but being able to have the creativity, the ability to be able to make some changes if we need to to admit that we need to, to not be afraid to make some changes if we need to, if the data is there to support it. And also to make sure that we are moving forward, being able to defend it, being able to achieve those goals that we want, being on the right track to achieve them.
Yeah, well, you clearly are recognizing how important data
Mhm.
will be as a factor in evaluating how well the plan is moving forward, how well the district is moving forward, how well results are being attained.
One other thing that I have to say is, in addition to defending the plan, is also to, we are elected to serve the residents. So we have to make sure that we are keeping the residents in our, being the number one thing is that what is the best for the residents? So that is, I think, my primary role is to make sure that we keep that in mind.
That was infused throughout everything that the SOAN plan was about. It was all about improving health and wellness and addressing social determinants of health and making residents in the Coachella Valley as healthy as they can possibly be, fulfilling that mission and achieving that vision. Yes, Director. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, and with that, the importance of ensuring that every person is that, the harder to reach, the harder to, I think that is what I see as my role in this board, is to ensure that we are working harder to achieve the equity issue.
Yep.
Okay. So that's all right.
Director Smith.
Yeah, I was just gonna piggyback, because I think that that's part of being accountable, is for us to be able to defend our decision making and explain why we made that decision, why we continue to make a decision, why we're doing a particular thing. And I think when we talk about clear evidence, dashboards, progress metrics, things of that nature, and I mean, I've run into this in the past as well, because sometimes there are things that like we do because they're needed and it's important, but we're not sure overall, like what is the global impact of it. We just know that, some things happen and there were some good things, but getting outside of that and saying, okay, but is this serving, toward our mission, but also how do we know that? And we have to in order to know that, we have to keep going back to the data, because we are responsible to be able to explain to the public now that, okay, $100 million. And from there, well, if we're spending this money and we're making these investments, what happened with that? And we have to be able to defend why we made a particular decision. And the best way to do that is to have evidence, I would say, to be able to demonstrate this was the impact. This is the reason why, and this is the ongoing impact, or this is the reason why we chose not to do this anymore. Here's the reason why.
Right. Very good. Very good.
I would add too, in that we stress the need for community partnerships throughout the strategic plan. And I think it's our responsibility as elected board members to help cultivate those and develop those that we already have. Every one of us that sits on this board has many, many contacts of those community partners that are going to be essential in how we really have, how we leverage what we want to do. And I think that's one of the main things we do. I think it's also important for us as a board is to support staff in the minutia work that they're going to have to do. And to both Letty and Anissa's point is communicating that to the public. It's not about us just thinking about what's best for the residents, but communicating to the residents too is like, and a back and forth is like, is this benefiting you, or this is how this will benefit you as well.
I think one of the key components of the strategic plan that I was so impressed with were the listening sessions that went on throughout the Coachella Valley.
Yeah.
That allowed the board and the organization to hear a lot about what was on people's minds. And it seems to me that would be a good thing to continue to do moving into the future, to stay in touch with what people are thinking, what they're feeling, how they see the strategic plan, not the plan, the workings happening as a result of the strategic plan benefiting them in their lives. And or, you know, if there are shortcomings, if there are broken parts, identifying those so that they can be remedied. How do you think the board might need to change in order for the plan to be most successful? Is there something about the board, the way it functions, what it does, how it works, that is going to need to be reconstructed or refurbished, upped its game in some way in your mind in order for the board to function at the highest possible level of effectiveness as you lead this organization forward? Or is just continuing to do things the way you've been doing them good enough?
I'll start with, I think that one of the ways that we could change has been on how we connect with the residents. This is a big district, and even though we've been in Coachella Valley for 8 years, at least, that number of years, I still think that a lot of areas, even the areas from before, the original district, don't know what the healthcare district does and what it, the resources. So I think being able to, how we can change is to better connect with the residents. You pointed out that the engagement sessions were very, I think were excellent, and how we can continue to do that in a way that is beneficial. And we've talked about whether it's physical, you know, having different locations that might be satellite places, partnering with entities that actually would allow us to do that. So just better engagement physically, so that we become more of a well-known resource and understanding of what we do.
Mhm.
And I would say to expand our thinking about how we, as we were talking about listening sessions, is that, you know, that we have all the zones in the area, but we actually represent the entire district, each one of us. And that we need to look at what the needs are in every corner of the district. And look at the healthcare needs of everybody that lives in the district. And the other thing is I think that, you know, we're not the only organization in the valley that is looking after the wellness and healthcare needs of the people. And I think that, as Greg was saying, there's a lot of collaboration to do. There are many organizations that we can partner with.
And there's probably a lot of redundancies that could be eliminated through those partnerships.
Exactly.
Where money could be better spent, resources could be better applied if those partnerships are effectively put to use. You started to say something directly, Gil.
I think that we also need to make sure that we're following our procedures and our guidelines that we have adopted, like the start using our groups for what they're meant for, you know, like our ad hoc committees or our task forces or whatever, to actually help us engage more with the community and to know, to follow the guidelines that we have, because sometimes I feel like we say we're gonna go a certain way and then we backtrack and then we don't do how it's supposed to be done.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, I would speak to, you know, as far as like the collaborations, I think that goes directly to the amplifier aspect of this, right? Because if we're amplifying something that already exists to a certain extent, right? So we're trying to, like, you know, accentuate it and bring it out more and elevate it, right? Is kind of how I look at it. So I do agree that I think that, you know, realizing like we're not trying to build a whole thing from the ground up, you know, from scratch. Like now we're going to build, you know, this fantastic healthcare system. so much as we're going to amplify,
Right.
you know, what we already have in place. And then I actually really liked, to answer your question, because it says at the bottom of the first page, last paragraph, that we're going to have to embrace new governance standards of performance. And so that means like fundamentally how we're doing meetings now, how we're doing various things like will need to change, you know, maybe not just the structure of the meeting, but individually, you know, how we do it. And I was reflecting on that and I appreciated that you put examples of questions in here. So you shouldn't be surprised if I specifically ask, why is this metric showing grant progress below target? I tend to be kind of literal like that sometimes, but I think it brings a good point because so many of us have background in particular areas, whether it be nonprofit, you know, government, whatever it be, like direct hands-on, even in service provision, that's where my mind can go. Because, you know, just for example, you know, the mobile unit, like, oh, okay, well, were you sure, like, was it parked in a way that you could see where and that's from my background, you know, as being an actual provider, as opposed to like looking at the metrics of it, like, okay, you know, we're hearing about it, but, and really allowing staff to flourish and do the job, you know, that we're asking them to do, as opposed to getting in there and trying to
Right.
nitpick, you know, certain things, because that is our experience. I don't think it comes from a bad place. But if we're going to embrace new governance standards, it means being very intentional, I think, about what questions that we're asking and what we're trying to get to, and try to stay away from, you know, and you outlined it very well in here, trying to stay away from, you know, getting overly involved in the minutia of things, as tempting as it is.
That's the difference between macro leadership and micromanagement. You know, understanding that difference and being able to effectively practice that and call out one another with respect when it tries to go in the way it shouldn't go.
If I may though, I
Yeah.
wanna just have a difference of an opinion there. Having been on this board a little bit longer, I don't think that we have ever, just generally, and every now and then maybe, but generally, I don't think we have gotten into the operations. I think that this being a special district board, that we I don't remember getting into that point where there might be some miscommunication, but I think what is the key here is to understand roles, and we've had that topic many times in through the years of understanding the roles of a board member and understanding the roles of staff to make sure that the communication is there. But policy and operations, I don't think any of us have the time and the interest to be actually doing operations. So
Yeah.
there's a little bit difference of opinion there. I don't think that we've done that. I think it's been miscommunication more than actually overstepping.
Like, if I could understand what you're saying, Director Smith, is that, you know, when you're looking at a future, it won't happen right away. When you're looking at a future, when the board is evaluating metrics for one of your pillars, workforce, for example, and a metric says that 23% of what, I'm not going to try to make up the metric, but it's a metric that has a percentage, something tangible, and it's not being achieved over a certain period. It's up to the board to ask the question, why are we not achieving this? What's standing in the way? And how can we move back to where we need to be? What are the root causes of our inability at this point to achieve what we said we wanted to achieve? That's not micromanagement. I think that's just strongly effective leadership
Information.
to make sure that you're not going to continue down a path of next quarter and the quarter after that, moving further away from what it is you said you wanted to achieve.
See, that's what I mean about communication, that perfect example that you just gave has been, I think what we normally do is we ask. And then it might be that Chris says, God, they're really getting into my, why are they asking? Why did I do this? Why did I do that? But it's about communication, that I think that there's an understanding of our role as policymakers, but not wanting to get into the operations. I don't think any of us want to do that, but we just need to make sure that we are making ourselves clear about how we, how we can be better board members, to stay in our lane. And I think all of us understand that we don't want to make Chris's job harder, but to understand how we get the information that we need. And if we're, and I know I say this, that if I'm somehow getting into that wrong lane, stop me. But, until somebody stops me, I may do it, but there's not, I don't think there's that wanting to become involved in it. We just have to be better board members to ensure that we, in our efforts to be better policymakers, that we're not overstepping.
I think you will find that if a metric is that's been approved by the board, been developed by staff and leadership, is not being achieved, you'll be hearing from them why.
Yeah.
You won't have to ask the question, why is this metric not performing up to the level that is expected? Kind of a no surprises performance mentality will be in effect.
And I think that having come from hospital management, that it's a very special tool that I've always been involved in is called root cause analysis.
Yeah.
In terms of problem solving. Like today at the hospital board meeting, they talked about failure of some equipment, and I raised my hand and said, well, did I miss something? Did anybody figure out why the equipment failed? It's just that kind of question that we ask.
Kind of the 5 whys.
Yeah.
Yes. To really get to the root. Yeah, Chris.
And I mean, what I'm hearing is like the root cause. I mean, and asking the questions to learn and to find out. What I'm also hearing from Larry is the caution of getting into, from an individual director's standpoint, to the CEO with their own direction. And that does happen. We may not believe it, but it does happen. And I think that's what I'm hearing partly too, is that to me, my understanding is, okay, when there's direction, it's coming from the board, not from an individual director. And, it happens. And that becomes challenging for staff.
I think that I agree that usually, I think actions should be made by the board in a public setting. However, when you have a board president, I think the board president is the one that is having to have that one-on-one with the CEO more during that time. So there's more conversations, and there's that need to work together to be able to communicate and understand and sometimes move things forward to the board, say, okay, well, let's put that to the board this time. So I think that is the only time that one board member has more, not to say more of a vote, but just the leading, the directing on how things come to the board, when they come to the board. That's when I know that when I was board president, I got a lot more conversation with the board, with the CEO than I did when the year after. The day afterwards, all of a sudden, I just became another board member, and I relied on the board president to take on that role of understanding things that were happening behind the scenes. So,
And I think there's a fine line between that extra communication and then direction to do something that hasn't come through the board direction. And there's a fine line there, and that's what can happen. And in our policy, it does say that the board president does not have any more authority.
Yeah, I
to
disagree
direct.
with you on that, Chris, in that there's not authority, like she or he doesn't have more of a vote, but there's more communication. There's more of ideas springing forward, more of well, how do we do this? And yes, no. So there's a lot more dialogue. There's more, just between those two people because you can't just rely on the board meeting because you have to make sure that that meeting is the most effective use of everybody's time.
Agenda setting is an
Yes.
example. The
Yes.
board president and the CEO get together to set the
But
agenda.
it just doesn't happen, the week before. There's things that happen during the month
Sure.
that you're gonna notify, hey, Madam President or Mr. President, the CEO of Tenant just contacted me today and they're going to have to shut off, the whole floor or whatever. So that's more of a communicate. You don't communicate that to the rest of us, and that's fine because you shouldn't have to be duplicating your work. So you're going to the board president. And so, okay, well, and then if something, the board president may say, well, Chris, I think this actually rises to the level of informing the full board. Can you send an email to the full board? Or say, okay, well, just put that in the agenda for next month. So I think there's that thing that the board president, the CEO, there is more of a need to have that communication consensus agreement on how to move something forward.
So I want to add a little caveat here too, in that we're a different type of board because we're elected officials. So I'll just relate this to the Board of Supervisors or even a city council, is that the Board of Supervisors, all 5 of them communicate independently with the CEO of the county on a regular basis. Most decisions come to a consensus eventually at the board meeting. City councils communicate one-on-one with their city managers on a nonstop basis. And so it's just a little different dynamic than what a traditional board is. I agree though with us not getting involved in operations, but I think especially if we're hearing from a constituent on a certain issue, I'm going to come to you about
Absolutely.
and a couple of things. I think, but again, it's not as, to your point, directing you what to do. That's really highlighting what
that's
the
the key.
issue is and that maybe we should bring this to the full board, or this is something that you as a CEO should look after. And I think you
And
do.
that's-
The way I have handled that, like if somebody, if I'm out and somebody tells me something, I would like to think that you are notifying the CEO if it's something that FYI, Chris, so-and-so, told me that they've been trying to, they want to meet with you to discuss a possible project, turn that over to you. If it's a problem, I'm gonna probably copy the board president, because I do believe that the board president has a higher, role to play than in the other ones. As soon as that person steps down and lets the next person, then I want to keep that person informed. And so I know that that's the way I normally do it, is that I copy whoever is the president. If there's a problem, if there's something that I think that needs to be shared, not to tell on anybody, but just so that way the board president can decide if he or she wants to do something about it. Again, because if you may disagree with this, but I do think that the board president can actually direct the CEO to put this on the agenda. Put this so that the full board can chime in on this, or put it in your report. So I do think that she or he is actually thinking of the full board and how does that information get shared?
We're getting off the topic.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'd like.
But if I just like, because it is a really important topic, I just want to say that, I've had the pleasure of representing all kinds of boards over the years. And this idea of, micromanaging or tasking is always something that is, you're dealing, elected officials, okay? But I think that overall, and you're absolutely right, that the board president has that responsibility and does interact more. And that's why it's kind of nice to have a rotating, and you've addressed these kinds of things. But I just wanted to say that, I just want to express the fact that how qualified this board is to undertake this big responsibility going forward. And I think that each of you should be proud that you bring to the table, history and experiences that are unique. And we have each of you, it's really true. And I think that this is going to really add to the success of the district. And I mean this, very sincerely with each board member, that you do have unique experience and backgrounds, and you all, you've dealt with this issue and other issues, but the micromanagement or tasking, it's a natural thing. I mean, some board members, they love to task. They love to task staff. And I'm sure, Greg, you've experienced it. I'm sure you've experienced, everybody's experienced this in any kind of type of organization. But I really think that, because of the unique qualities and experience of this board, that you really will have a great opportunity to make a difference with this responsibility that you have in healthcare in the Valley and the accessibility of healthcare in the Valley. And so you all should be very excited about that. So I think you can work through these issues.
Well, as you all know, because you've got them right in front of you, I sent all of you a week or so ago this paper outlining what I think are some leadership shifts and some cultural information and some governance standards and some board member skills that I think will be important as you all move forward in guiding the Desert Healthcare District and Foundation forward into the future, capitalizing on the power of your new strategic plan. So what I'd like to do is ask you to consider the shifts in how the board should lead the district and foundation successfully into the future. I don't want to focus on this so much. Some of the governance standards that I've proposed for ensuring strategic success and some of the personal skills that I think will be required for director success in leading strategic success. And I'd like to I don't want to go in depth on any individual one of these, but I would like to just have you take a look starting out on pages 2 to 3 in the document, and think about some of the shifts in how the board should lead the district into the future. And the first one on the list, and these are just, after I've studied the strategic plan and I've studied what Activate Inclusion has talked to you about, and I've thought about my own experience over 40 years working with boards of directors and foundations around the country. I've really put a lot of thought into what I think it's going to take for this board to shift some of how it goes about its work in order to be most successful in moving forward to be as optimally responsible and successful in achieving this strategic plan. So the first one that I identified was thinking about a shift to strategy-centered leadership. And I talked there about not being primarily focused on programmatic updates and director reports and current activities and grant and sponsorship approvals and things like that, the kinds of things that you're primarily doing now, but to spend a lot more time on dialogue and decision energy on the metrics we already talked about, to spend much more time on the pillars, the metrics, where are we headed, what are we doing, how are we doing, and to be able to ask more performance questions, as Director Smith pointed out, rather than just saying, how's this grant doing, to say, why is this metric showing that this grant progress is below target, and what grantee action is required to improve progress toward the target. So different kinds of thinking, different kinds of questions. Shifting to consistent management performance verification. That means, again, relying more on data and evidence, clear performance reporting, insisting on evidence before endorsement or recommendations. This is not intended to be any kind of a mistrust in administration, but it's really a governance discipline, as I outlined in the paper. And you can follow along with me on page 3 if you want to.
Larry, could you give us a little bit more detail about that idea in terms of how that works?
You mean the shift to consistent management
Exactly.
performance verification?
It's an
It just
example.
means that when you hear information, to me, when you hear information from management, you don't just hear, well, we had such and such an event and it was really successful. We had 300 people who showed up. What you really want to know is more, well, for what purpose, what was really accomplished? How does that connect to our mission and our vision? How does that advance our ability to be strategically successful in moving the organization forward? So it's moving past just reporting on stuff and connecting stuff to strategic implications and strategic success, I guess. It makes people think, what am I reporting? Why am I reporting it? Why does it matter? And is there a metric attached to this somehow?
It's sort of like our vision program, our mobile vision van. And
Yeah,
instead of saying how many people attended, but how many people improved their vision,
yeah,
or how many cases did we refer to an ophthalmologist that somebody who had problem with their eyesight?
yeah.
Mhm.
I can even carry that to a further conclusion. If we improved 200 kids' eyesight, and what difference does that make in a child's life? Yeah,
In
we
terms of
improved
their ability to
improved
read.
their eyesight, but it improved their ability to read. And
So that example,
What
I
else?
was trying to think on how this would be practiced. For example, our mobile units, and I thought, how would this change the way Alejandro reports? Because we have to get trained on this too.
Mhm.
Because we're so used to just thinking, oh, how many people showed up, but how we're gonna have to get trained, staff is gonna learn these methods, and then we're gonna learn how to do this. So your question was, I'm just very curious to see how it would change, because we all have to learn these new methods so that we learn how to ask the right questions for being able to get to the answers that we are all trying to achieve that goal.
yeah,
So that'd be interesting to see how we would learn those.
Yeah.
Director Smith.
Yeah, I have something to add to that
Figure that?
too, that came up, let's see, I think it was a recent F&A meeting. But, a particular contract that we were looking at, whether or not to renew, and, a question was asked, like, well, what has been the benefit of this relationship, to the district? What has, is there helping us with a particular thing? What has been the benefit? And from that, we discussed and said, okay, well, staff will put together, a list of, in this particular case, it was which bills have we been able to get, that we were, supporting or whatever. And so I guess in my mind, and I think that collaboration, it kind of worked very well because it was kind of a natural, okay, well, we're doing this, like, yes, we may like working with someone, or we like doing a particular thing because it's been a pleasant experience, but I think we have to be able to demonstrate, what exactly is coming from that as far as like data, like our data, like what exactly is coming from this that we can justify why this dollar was spent in this way. And so I thought it was really good, and that, we'll see a report, but so a little bit of that's kind of,
Yeah.
we're already doing it a little bit, But I found that to be very helpful from staff, especially who say, oh yeah, we can pull that information together because I think that's an important question.
Yeah. The shift to accountability for high performance, what that is really all about is holding one another accountable or addressing governance underperformance. If any of you feel that any of your peers are not doing their jobs effectively, enforcing governance standards, you know what the standards are. Everybody should adhere to those standards. Everybody should perform at the very highest level. And it helps to perform or conduct an annual board self-assessment. It also helps to conduct an annual peer evaluation. I'm not going to go into detail on that, but it's basically everybody evaluates everybody else in terms of how effective they think they are using a set of approved criteria, and makes recommendations for how they think they can perform better as a board colleague. It's a best practice. It's a governance best practice.
Even for elected officials?
It's for any board.
Particularly, I mean, this is what Larry does, and this is part of the ACHD, getting your, what is it, continuing award, is to do the self-evaluation process. And I think it's something you guys will do very well. And we've done it in the past, but I think because of the connection that Larry has with his board now, it'll even be, it'll be better.
Shifting to consistent data-driven strategic leadership is just
You skipped
about,
one.
pardon?
You skipped one. The shift to consistent role discipline and decision authority.
Okay, thank you. That's about enforcing governance and management boundaries. We've talked a lot about that. We talked about it earlier in this meeting. Understanding decision authority, speaking through formal governance channels, and ensuring that there is organizational clarity and effectiveness. Who does what, how it works, how the organization works, what is the specific role of governance, what's the specific role of management, and making sure that those boundaries are carefully drawn and carefully adhered to. And again, I told you, I think at a last meeting, that you do have a document, a very detailed document that lays out, that we created for you months ago, that lays all those out. And it's an editable document. If you want to change it, make any modifications through one of your committees, that's an easy thing for you to do. It was created purposely for you to do that. So
I don't think we use our governance committee the best way. Maybe we can look at how we can use that document and evaluate each other. I don't know, but yeah, I think that would be something that the governance committee, and how to make that committee a little bit more effective and to address some of these things here about role, discipline, and authority.
Yeah.
Not just policy making, but actual operation of it, of governance.
yeah. Shifting to consistent data-driven strategic leadership, that's just talking about understanding trends, being able to look to the near and not so near future, and thinking about that are happening throughout the Coachella Valley, and talking about how those may affect your strategies, and you're thinking about where the district is headed for the near and longer term future. Using dashboard trends is one way of accomplishing that. And again, using listening sessions and other kind of organized research to be able to keep your ear to the ground as much as possible, so that you have a continuous flow of information coming to you to tell you where things are, where you think things might be headed, and how you can incorporate that information into your strategic thinking. And then the final one is shifting to a stewardship of impact. That is going from asking questions like, do we fund good programs, to do our investments measurably improve health outcomes, with a focus on evaluating return on impact. So do those make sense to you? Those kinds of shifts?
Well, I also think that when we start measuring our impact, we have many partners that we work with as well. And, you know, it's good to look at what the impact that they're doing. Like this morning at the free clinic at the in Desert Hot Springs, we had the cosmetology college show up with about, I don't know, 20 kids in training, giving haircuts to people. And what's the measure of, how do we measure giving haircuts to the community, free haircuts? You know, it was really, watching the interaction was a lot of fun.
Yeah. I'm sure that there's a correlation to an outcome there,
Mhm.
potential outcome,
Mhm.
you know, to those as well. Maybe not as dramatic.
That was dramatic.
Yeah. So,
And the shower trailer was there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't measure the shower trailer and their impact. Yeah, you just need to look at the people that come out of the shower nice and clean
yeah.
and how good they feel. Yeah, one woman walked off with a roller suitcase and said, well, I just got out of rehab, so I really needed this.
Huh.
You know, just little things that, how do you measure that? It's just really important.
Be interesting to, if there was a way to be able to follow,
Mm-hmm.
quote unquote,
Mm-hmm.
someone coming out of a situation like that, to see where
Where they're going.
where it leads them.
There is, county has a major
Clarity.
database system that tracks all that. So I mean, and ideally, when they're out at sites doing stuff like this, those individuals are being put into that database system, and we track all of that. So unfortunately, not every provider uses it. So that's right.
But maybe that's a collaboration right there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? We can find out from.
Because that's how you measure impact. You're not gonna get any real good data of how many people have had a shower or a haircut. But you will have good impact on, okay, at this event, 6 people were put into the homeless management information system, and in 6 months to a year, 5 out of those 6 were permanently housed
Mhm.
with services. So that's where you get your data.
Mhm.
Well, I also identified 10 governance standards that I thought would be helpful in ensuring strategic plan success. And I want to go through these. They're pretty simple. You just have to tell me whether you think you agree with them or not. Okay? No strategic objective is approved without quantifiable success criteria. Agree or disagree?
Can you explain strategic objective?
So
make sure.
a specific action could be an initiative, it could be a tactic, it could be a well, you've already got the pillars, but it could be an objective or a tactic, something you're going to do that's really important, that is going to help you fulfill the strategic plan.
Okay, thank you. I was just trying to understand how that
Okay,
fit in,
yeah.
right? Because we have our pillars.
There's lots of words
So, okay.
in strategic plan.
And don't we do that already?
Do you do it now?
Yeah, don't we, with our grant program, don't we have the objectives for each organization?
Through your, what's it called? Our
Our,
RBA.
yeah, yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So, but I think staff is more in tune with the outcomes on RBA than the board is.
Well, still, you know,
Mhm.
through RBA, you're doing that. Okay.
Yeah.
100% of discretionary spending must map to a strategic priority.
Mm-hmm.
The board reviews reviews, should say, progress versus target, variance explanations, risk indicators, and corrective actions.
Is that on each grant or each initiative?
Yes,
Progress.
yes.
And that's not just,
That would be on the big things.
yeah, and not just grants or initiatives, but the actual pillars.
Yeah.
Within the strategic plan.
Yeah.
Okay.
Majority of CEO mid-year and annual performance review criteria should be strategy-based. We're not voting on these. I'm just introducing these and asking if they make sense to you. When performance deviates from plan, the board requires root cause analysis, management corrective action plans, and a timeline for recovery.
It's performance of our pillars, of our
Yeah,
initiatives.
Make sense? Strategic focus should be maintained in board agendas. That might need some changes in your board agendas and the way they're constructed. We might talk about that a little bit later on. Got some ideas about that. I don't want to force a change in your agendas, but I do have some thoughts. At least that's my job,
Mhm.
is to throw out ideas. And
Okay.
you're certainly free to reject any and all or accept.
Can you give us an example, Larry?
I will give you an example later.
Okay.
Okay. Ensure organizational alignment with strategic priorities. That's obviously making sure that everything up and down the organization is aligned with the strategic priorities that have been approved in the strategic plan. Ensure that risk is actively managed. Whose job is it to manage risk, Chris?
Chris?
I'd say it's Chris.
Well, do you have a risk manager in the organization?
Well, not as individual
Not
one,
an individual.
but someone is tasked with, risk coverage with our insurances and
Okay.
things like that. Yes.
Require a periodic strategic risk assessment. Now, that's the key word there is strategic risk assessment. So that's, anything embedded within the strategic plan that would carry some type of risk outside of the normal insurance and, things like that. And then number 10, ensuring transparency and public accountability, which I think you're already pretty darn good at. But there's going to be a lot more stuff to be transparent about, a lot more things to be accountable to the public for as you move forward to carry out your strategic plan.
Larry, on number 9, I'm a little bit confused about strategic risk assessment. I was thinking first that you were thinking about as we grow, that we grow with, less risk. We talked recently about having an HR person, the pros and cons of in or out of the organization. We talked about, facilities and the risk of having, the kind of in and out traffic and all this stuff. And then, so that's what I was thinking when I saw that. But then when you said to ensure that we are following the strategic plan, so is it different, or I'm not sure what number 9
Well,
means.
you'll get new data, new insights from the community, new insights from any research you do in the community, environmental insights, and you'll find risks that exist as you move forward in carrying out the strategic plan. And as those risks are highlighted, they need to be assessed and determined how much of a priority are they? How dangerous are they? Do they impact our pillars? Do they impact any of our initiatives?
So
That's what
that
I'm
would
trying to get
include
at.
funding decisions also?
It could include funding, it could include, yeah, sure. Sure.
But I can see from that example, we were talking about the parking issue.
Mhm.
To me, I see that as like an indirect risk, because if we have continued parking problems at the medical plaza, that may lead to providers that are deciding, you know what, this is too much of a hassle, I'm gonna find someplace else to move my practice. So that could impact then our overall revenue, et cetera, that's coming from an asset that we make. So to me, I see this kind of an indirect kind of risk that could impact more of our asset productivity.
So that's how we're speaking, is that's a very good example, just like we talked about, you know, the use of solar and what would be, but I was just kind of confused about the funding issue. That, you know, how do you determine risks when you're making funding decisions? But it could be the organization, like, let's take a recently approved one. Example, I'll do Intercare, even though shouldn't, that's when that comes up. You know, if that's a big funding commitment, how would you, since you've looked at our meetings, how would that fall into that we have to assess the risk involved with that kind of a funding decision?
I would think so.
Yeah, because I think, you know, the risk of like putting the $3 million out there is that we don't have the crystal ball to know right now if that's a successful program. So I think that's the risk, is if we're putting funding out there. You have control over that. Like,
That's a risk.
You know, I can share with staff and the board some risk management policies that districts, special districts like this have. Maybe kind of see how you want to develop it and incorporate that into some of your committees and work with staff on that. But there are actual policies that we could share with you.
If you were to embrace some of these personal skills required for director success, these are the kinds of skills that would be incorporated into a peer evaluation. I think also these are the kinds of skills. I know that you don't have any control over who gets elected to the board, but you can influence who gets elected to the board by putting forth the board's views, at least in my opinion, of what the board is looking for in terms of director skills. And people running for the board, some, not all, but some would look at the skills and say, do I have what it takes to serve on the Desert Healthcare District Board? So am I a strategic thinker? Do I have an orientation toward outcomes, or not? Am I that kind of a thinker? Do I have an ability to with data literacy, an ability to govern through analytics? Not everybody does. Some people are really good at it, some aren't. And not every person on a board will have every single one of these personal skills, but it's important for the board to at least have a combination of these skills, I think. An accountability mindset, they're willing to take ownership of results, not to say, well, I was certainly not a proponent of that, but I guess I'll go along with it, until I can defeat it next time or whatever. I mean, to take accountability for ownership of results and do everything possible to make sure that it happens. A decision discipline with a focus on clarity and timeliness, getting things done in a timely manner, and having clarity and focus in the process. Having constructive courage, being able to interact with your colleagues with candor and with respect. Having role discipline, the ability to operate exclusively within governance lanes of influence, back to what we were talking about earlier. Being a systems thinker, understanding the meaning behind complexity. You have to be a systems thinker if you're going to be a governor of this organization, particularly with your new strategic plan. So, what do you think about those? For those, can you embrace those? Does those look like the kind of skills that directors should have in order to be successful leaders on this board, both today and looking forward into the future?
I think the hardest one will be the systems thinking. Is, like Carol said earlier, is that's one of the things that she mentioned at the very end, that I think the key thing, that's the beginning, the middle, and the end.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, this is a difficult job. It really is. If you do it right, but really a difficult job. And as Jeff said, this is a really good board. And you have the ability to make whatever transitions are necessary to be able to be the kind of leaders that are going to be required to move into this next level of thinking and leadership that this community needs and deserves to achieve the mission and the vision and the strategic direction. But you need to think, I had a little section in there called culture. You're also creating a culture for this organization, something in that little write-up I had that was talked about the DNA of the board. And I referred to something that I kind of called the DCHD way, you know, the way this board works, how governance, the DNA of the governing processes of this board, because long after you're gone from this board, others are going to be taking up the mantle of leadership. And you don't want future boards to just do it on their own. You want a progress of performance to move forward in leading this organization, not a whole different group of people coming in and saying, well, it's the way I want to do it. There is a way to do this, and you're going to be providing that way forward, I think, and setting the culture for a board to lead this strategic plan into the future that sets a standard that can, I think, be there for many, many years to come.
I just have to say, you know, I reflect back on 30 years ago, this board, and how far you've come in all of these areas, and looking at good governance and how being a good director. Because the typical question in 1995, when people were running for the district board, was, do you provide health insurance for directors? I mean, that's literally, that was the level of now, fortunately, we did have some good people on the board at the time, and that were you know, thoughtful and everything, but that's the kind of people that were thinking about running, and it was whether we had health insurance. So I think we've come a long way.
Phone calls already with those kinds of questions.
Yeah.
You know, what does the board get paid?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Larry, on this though, is what you just said about that we're creating the plan for future boards, but in reality, is it every 2 years or is it every year? Every 2 years, we have new board members potentially coming on. So the strategic plan is only as good as it's able to produce that it's working. Because in 2 years, we could have, you know, a majority that says, you know what, let's change it. Let's start making, but if it's a good strategic plan, if we're showing that it's worked, that it's strong, that it's, you know, then it's only, that's when it could continue to be supported.
Yeah.
And that's where the systems thinking comes into play.
Right.
But understanding it and being able to show that it's working. Because people, you know, the systems change thinking, it could be really strong idea, but it takes a while to actually show that it's working. So in the beginning, it's being able to set it up as a foundation, but people want to start seeing results and, 5 years, they want to say, well, is it working or not? If it's not, so that's what it's as good as being able to demonstrate and then, and being able to demonstrate that where it wasn't working, that we make changes, but it's always having to substantiate it.
Well, the way that the strategic plan is set up, it's going to work because part of making it work is realizing that when things need to change, you change them. You modify them. You recognize when things need change, but the core foundation of the strategic direction remains the same. The pillars remain the same. Workforce is not going to change as one of your pillars. I mean, but initiatives may change. Tactics are certainly going to change, but the foundation, just like your mission and your vision, those aren't likely to change. That's the rock solid foundation of what this organization is all about. So sure, as you learn, as you grow, as things change in the environment, some things are going to change. And through metrics and other ways, you're going to find that you need to move the needle. But that's why the strategic plan is so important.
I don't think those would change. I think the possibility could be that new board members or even this board may say, you know what, let's add something to it. That's what I see is the risk, is that just adding more things. And then it becomes that we lose our focus. I think that's more likely to happen than for it to be that we replace that with something else.
Well, that's a good point. That would take a lot of discipline by the board to ask a lot of hard questions about, is this wise? Why are we doing it? What would be a disadvantage? What would be a risk to us, to the whole plan, if we start adding more pillars or adding more initiatives or, whatever it might be. That's why it's good to have 7 directors. Make sure that, hopefully is held in check.
Mhm.
So I wanted to,
And I think that
Carol.
one of the issues that we're facing today is June 1st and 660,000 people losing SNAP benefits in California only. We've got huge food insecurity that we're facing.
Although that number's not really correct.
It's not really correct.
Because current SNAP beneficiaries are not losing their benefits.
Okay, I'm just reading the headlines from ABC 7.
Yeah.
good example.
There's still too many that are losing them, but.
Not that many. Thank you.
Good example. Step up and call out an inaccurate.
Yeah.
In a very friendly way.
Step up. Yes, thank you, Greg.
Chris?
And it's not necessarily a personal skill of director, but if someone's looking to run for the board and that, like Jeff was saying, that was a key thing that they were looking at was their insurance. But, one thing is time commitment. But I think sometimes directors come on not intentionally, but they don't understand the time commitment that's required to really be quality director.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a big time. It's really been a big time commitment through the
Yes.
through the SOAN and activate inclusion process.
Mhm.
And you guys have been troopers, for sure.
But there's always something, the year before it was something else, the year before was something else.
Mhm.
So it does require a lot of time.
Yeah,
You can anticipate that.
A lot of time, a
More
lot of
hours
reading.
a month.
Mhm.
a lot of meetings. Okay, I wanted to talk to you about the board meeting agenda. And again, if you don't like what I have to say, you're not going to hurt my feelings. Okay? In fact, you would never hurt my feelings for anything. You could tell me that I'm nuts and it wouldn't hurt my feelings. Well, maybe it would a little bit.
Yeah.
So I've
Spoken like a true nurse.
I thought about your board agenda, and there's nothing wrong with your agenda. It's been basically the same, structured the same way for a long, long time. But I thought with this new strategic plan, as you're going to be moving into thinking differently about issues and challenges and metrics and pillars and all that, how might this agenda be modified to better match with the realities of what you're going to be doing in the future? So how do you think the agendas need to change to reflect the requirements outlined in the final strategic report and everything you've learned throughout the planning process?
Why don't you start us off?
Okay.
I have a thought. Is
Okay.
that, okay, so we have the pillar. So to me, each of those would be a category that we're talking about at each board meeting and what the, if there's anything that we're working on specifically under each pillar, that those are addressed so that we're staying focused on the pillars themselves. And then things like for example, this month's agenda, as much as we can do that's been already come through a committee, that we're putting that on the consent agenda so that we're not spending a bunch of time on that that's already been vetted and approved by other directors that we should rely on. And then we're focusing our time on strategies and activities, et cetera, that are happening within each pillar. Just thought I have.
And I agree, except the part for the grants. The
Right.
grants, because we're still trying to understand the pillars. But I totally agree with everything else. So.
Yeah, I agree. The grants should be communicated separately.
And
because that is a-
sponsorships.
I don't even argue against sponsorships. I think those are vetted through the program committee now,
Right.
and we never turn one down at the board ever. I think too, just staff reports too, is, God bless Alejandro, but we really, especially if you served on program committee and other committees, we've heard all that. And again, this is no slam against the good work he's doing. But that stuff can be written up. They do great graphics in the report. Because I agree, Chris, I think a lot can be on a consent agenda and it's outside of the grant, the major
Agreed.
grants. that we're doing.
And if somebody has a question and you.
Then just raise it, pull it, and
Mhm.
raise it.
Yeah,
And that's what I've tried to promote with Alejandro's work. It's great work, but the staff reports can communicate.
Mhm.
And it's up to the directors to read the reports.
mhm,
And then we can focus on discussing strategies and
Mhm.
things that are happening in the actual strategic plan.
That was one of the thoughts that I had as I went through a couple of the agendas was, and hearing some of the board meetings where someone will report on a committee and say, well, the report is in your packet and I don't really have anything else to report. Does anybody have any questions? And I thought, well, why isn't that in the consent agenda? Unless there's an action attached to the report for a vote,
mhm,
then it's just information.
right,
So,
and that's consent.
Well, okay, but the committees, like finance and stuff, those are all approved on the consent calendar. Okay, and then we have the report section. And typically that's a little bit awkward sometimes because I recall when Yvette was president, she was very good at saying, okay, here's the report. Is there any questions, and we'd move on. So, I think though it's important to have some opportunity if there's something that the committee wants to talk about, to have that on the agenda. But I like the approach that Yvette took, which was basically, hey, unless you got any questions, we're just moving on. And I think, I think Kimberly's doing that also, but we can do that so that we can move through that. These agendas, and sometimes if you're running a hospital, you get these huge, hundreds and hundreds of pages of agendas. And so it's really challenging to have to start looking, getting into the weeds on a lot of these programs. And so that's why the tendency has been to try to get as much as possible through the committees and then up on the consent agenda, so we don't just spend all, hours of your time on this stuff without, but at the same time, we want to make sure that everybody feels comfortable about it and.
Well, and anybody can pull anything off the consent agenda if
Yeah.
they choose to.
Yeah,
And I think to your point is, so like at the committee level, instead of giving opportunity to answer any questions for each individual report, maybe just read what if there's 4
Right.
agenda items there, and then ask in general for all reports, are there any questions?
Mhm,
So then when you're moving through
mhm.
that committee meeting section quicker than just addressing it on each
Right.
individual.
And I think that sponsorships are a total waste of time on board agendas. I think as long as the program committee
That's
sticks
better.
within the budget, that they should approve it.
Yeah, and go on the
Go
consent
on the
agenda on the
consent
board.
agenda.
And that's what we're doing this month.
and I think what's great about it is that you gotta have as your colleagues on these committees go through these and do roll up their sleeves and do the specific detailed work, that there has to be deference towards the recommendations unless there's something that just sticks
Right.
out that you feel very strongly about.
Let's take a look at what some of my thoughts are. You can tell me what you think. Okay, so as you know, that your agenda is the most powerful governance tool that you control as a board. So the idea would be to have strategy driven board meetings, kind of going along with what you said, Chris, I think. Go from activity focused to impact agendas. The board governing through primary impact metrics, and I think someone suggested 5 to 7 per strategic pillar. You're not ready for that yet because you haven't developed them, but I'm talking ultimately quarterly and annual review of outcomes, and recognize that metrics inform your decisions. They're not just reports. They really do inform decisions that you're going to make. Move away from individual grant and sponsorship reviews to more of a system stewardship concept. Again, playing that role as a health system amplifier. And go from general reporting to decision-oriented governance, using data that drives your funding decisions, your course corrections, and your strategic prioritization. So that's kind of a broad overview. Yes, Director Delara.
Okay, so I like what this is, but I think that this has a potential to be a lot of data if you're doing it every month. So if there was a way that we could do this as we are creating this system, that every month we look at a certain part of it so that we could focus more on the smaller quantity and be able to put more attention and understanding, and then doing it on a quarterly basis. I don't know if it's possible that one month we do pillar 1, 2, second month we do 2, 3. And then I know that we're going to have different funding requests coming in, but we kind of assess how is that pillar doing? How is that impact of that funding going in there? And being able to focus a little bit more attention, so that we have a 20-minute discussion on it. And but you don't want to do it times 5 because then that's like way over. And it's just like every month we're doing this, it kind of seems old. But if you're focusing on 1 or 2, pillars and then seeing the impact on it, I don't know, that's just an idea.
I think that's a great point, because I think if you figure, each quarter, if you're doing 3 months, is that, like to your point, is you do like pillar 1 and 2 first month, pillar 3 and 4 second month, and then you could even on the third month is more tactic
Like a
type stuff,
summary.
or like tactic type stuff, or summary of that, or lost my train of thought, but I was thinking of something. Like the community partnership building, or something like delving more into one, especially like within the pillars or the tactics, some of the ones that are more strategy focused than they are, say, initiative focused, is maybe spend that third month on that kind of thing, and then do a quarterly review type thing.
I think you have to devise a strategy for how you're going to carry
Right.
this out. that works for the board.
Right.
That doesn't overwhelm the board, because if it overwhelms you, you won't do it well.
No, and we don't want 4-hour meetings, so.
Yeah, 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 it's gotta stay within your ability to
Your
do it.
attention span.
Exactly right.
And then we also have to recognize there's the district and then the foundation.
Yeah,
And they're gonna cross over into those
Yeah.
pillars, so.
well, here's a thought. So following your call to order, your pledge of allegiance, the approval of the agenda, public comment, and the consent agenda, what if you had what you call the strategic impact review as an agenda header? The purpose would be to evaluate progress towards strategic outcomes. And in that, and again, I did this obviously before we just had this conversation. You would review the primary impact metrics by pillar. This could be, say, pillars 1 and 2. And you consider the question, are the metrics trending toward the targets? Where are we off track? What decisions do we need to make? And what are the priority issues that we need to address as a board? Then we would need to talk about performance variance and corrective action. The purpose would be to address any gaps in performance that may exist. What areas are below target? If they're below target, you don't always have to do a root cause analysis. I mean, I think you do those when there's a real serious breach of some sort. But maybe do a root cause analysis, but certainly propose some kind of corrective actions. What do we need to do to get back in sync? And then board action would be to approve any adjustments and approve any further action within the strategic impact review. So that would be the first thing on the agenda. And I think that kind of goes along with what you were talking about, Chris, starting right after the consent agenda, strategy focus.
And some of this is gonna take a little while, especially
Yeah,
to get the data, get the
Right.
metrics.
And I was
things
just gonna
like
say
that.
too,
Yeah.
it's like, even if you go back and have those as like the placeholder, initially, even probably the next year
yeah.
is gonna be. Is
More just discussing the strategy.
the strategy, exactly right, or what are the metrics, or,
Right.
what do we need, infrastructure wise within the district and foundation to make these.
Data
things
that's
happen.
available.
Data, yeah,
Currently.
Because
so I
like
can still though, I think you can keep
other
kind of that.
programs that we could use to help us shape, how we want to do it. But like the county, park data, the school data, so I think we could use other data to help us become better understanding.
Great.
I would suggest considering replacing strategic funding and partnerships with a title like strategic investment decisions. And then each item would include within that individual grant decisions would include, how does it align with a particular pillar? What are the expected outcomes from that grant? And what are the evaluation metrics? And it sounds like you've already got those through your current evaluation system. And then,
But we have to create a whole new one
yeah,
based on the new strategic. plan.
yeah.
Yeah, because you're kind of using this kind of a methodology with our current.
It's our current grant program, it's just realigning the
Yeah.
pillars.
Right.
And then a section called system alignment and partnerships. The purpose would be to govern in that health system amplifier role. Consider key partnerships, any system gaps that you think are present, any existing coordination issues that may exist. And your role as a board would be to remove any barriers and to do anything you can to align the stakeholders. So, different process. You're still approving grants. You already said you're gonna propose to put sponsorships under the consent agenda. And we haven't talked at all about reports yet.
So let me just comment on this. Part of the challenge we have is that under the Brown Act, you've got to have a description of the agenda item and the potential action that the board's going to take. And so I like the idea of what you're talking about here, Larry, but I think we need to work with the staff and what I'll call the leadership ad hoc committee, which is the president and vice president, to see how we could do this and still meet the legal standards. Because the way the law is, it's basically when somebody in the public looks at your agenda, they're going to know what you're going to be, in a brief form, what action that you're potentially going to take, what the item is. And so that's kind of what we've always tried to orient ourselves on. So this is a bit challenging, but I do think, it's certainly worth trying to explore.
I think it could still work to meet.
Okay.
Right, I mean, I'm not an expert in Brown Act like you are.
Well, no. And this is not rocket science. This is just simply that, so the general public has an idea of what you're specifically going to consider and what potential action you're going to take.
I agree. But I do think that within the structure that he has, that you could explain, like just on the discussion of the pillars or whatever in that first section, you could briefly spell out that. To your point, though, all the action items would come under that other, on the previous slide.
Okay.
I'm just proposing a skeleton.
Right, exactly.
One thing I see as a possible challenge is that we may get, like say, a grant application that crosses over pillars. So that's always been a little bit of a challenge for us, even on our current structure, where they may be applying for funding for multiple goals or strategies. So, it's still going to have to be an action item, but it may cross over into pillars.
Which I don't think is a problem.
What's that?
I don't think that's a problem.
No, it's
Just
just,
a good thing.
oh yeah, no, it's a
Yeah.
good thing, but just,
For the explanation part of it.
right.
I don't know what the requirements are for the Desert Region Center CEO report and for the governing board report, but as much as possible, if we could get any kind of inclusion of any strategic risks or any opportunities ahead included in those reports, I think that would be valuable for the board. The CEO of the hospital may not want to talk about those kinds of things.
No, he won't.
Scratch that.
Because that's like even when either Carol or I do the governing board report, it's bare bones.
Okay,
Because a lot of that's proprietary
I
information.
understand. I've been on a hospital board.
Yeah.
But I did ask him at the end of the board meeting what I can report.
Yeah.
And then I called this community insight, or committee insight reports. So each committee would report in the same format, if they have a report to make. If there's no action item or anything, but if there is, they can report key insights, any strategic implications emerging out of their committee, and any decision and or direction needed by the board. If one of those three things wasn't required, then I'm not sure that a committee report is necessary. My opinion.
I mean, push back anybody, but I think to your point, Chris, like you said before, is we basically have there's usually 3 to 4 items per committee that are reports that. And just like you said, how Yvette's handled the patent, how Kimberly does it now, it's like, these are all in your packet. So except if there's an action item, then you would take an
But
action.
that's going to be on the consent calendar. So
Yeah,
unless it's something.
Unless it's an action
unique,
item.
Yes,
Right.
special.
And if it bypassed the committee for whatever reason, it's just
Right.
coming to the board.
Yep.
And then another item that I put forward is compliance and fiduciary oversight. You got a financial report as much as possible linked to strategy, legal updates, any required approvals of any kind. Board member comments, convene to closed session and adjournment. So
Why wouldn't compliance and fiduciary oversight be in the consent calendar?
Because that's basically the F and A committee, isn't it?
Financial and I
Legal
think the only
updates?
thing being is that legal right now isn't, but it could be.
Mhm.
That'd be up to you.
Yeah, I mean, we could, there's no, there's nothing sacred about that, believe me.
Yeah,
It's just been something we've done and easily dispensed with.
And
Even
required
required
approvals that we've
approvals.
already discussed that we'll do
Yeah.
as many of those in consent unless if it's funding that we want to focus a little bit more on those. Then, but they'll have a committee recommendation. So unless there's a question, I'm still
Yeah,
not
no,
sure who will present.
Yeah, no,
those.
but I think we certainly could shorten that and basically just, because it's just information anyway.
Good work, Larry.
And do you think that some of that has,
It's a great
some
skeleton, yeah.
restructuring potential?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, we're about done. Where to from here?
Onward, jumping.
Back to the Courtyard Marriott.
Austria on that day.
I do think that we should have these, maybe every 6 months or something. I don't know how often, but it has to be something regularly. We can't just have these whenever, we're starting something or we're ending something or when there's a problem. I talked about the governance committee having a little bit more of a understanding of what we should be looking at and maybe just having that when we do have issues that we need to address, that we want to have a better understanding to work together, to be working together, communication, all that stuff, that we do schedule a workshop.
And is it beneficial to have Larry maybe on a quarterly basis
Yeah.
Yes.
to kind of do like some refresh or see where we're at?
Evaluation.
Things that, we should be
Yeah.
tweaking under the governance.
I mean, one of the things we haven't done for a while is this self-evaluation process. And I think that would be, particularly after the work he's done,
Right.
that would be nice follow-up to segue into that.
You know, what I would do if you want to do that is I'd like to prepare a custom one
Yeah,
that is an appropriate evaluation based on everything that we've learned through this whole strategic planning, activate inclusion process, something that responds to that, not just one of your.
yeah, I mean, and there's
Basic-
nothing wrong with the formats that you've used, the Walker Company uses and stuff, but with all the work that you've done, you could really tailor something that I
Yeah.
think
Yeah, I
would
like that
be
idea.
really
Yeah.
special for this board.
Yeah, something
I
that would
think
really
what's
be
been-
unique to your needs.
Yeah, I agree, because I think kind of the standard one that ACHD have also incorporates like some hospital
Yeah,
operation
Yeah.
stuff, which is not for us, and I think that's been kind of frowned upon. Well, like this doesn't really, you can't really connect with that. So
This would
having
be,
a,
this would be
unique.
completely customized
Yeah.
for
yeah,
Desert Healthcare District.
yeah, and I think you'd be foolish not to take advantage of that.
Yeah.
And if we're gonna do something like that, I would continue to watch all your board meetings and stay attuned to what you're doing and.
I don't know if this is practical, but coming from that assessment, if I am rated as I need to improve, my fellow board members say, hey, you're doing this that you could improve on, and I also, would there be an opportunity that I could have like a work plan or something, as ideas to actually, that I know that, I don't know if that would be practical, that would be some of the one-on-one, the same way that I expect that you would have with the CEO. Would there be the opportunity for Larry to work with a board member one-on-one if there's?
let's see, why not?
Sure.
Well,
I've offered that before.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And is there any training on strategic thinking? We've identified it's one of our two
Yeah.
big issues here in terms of all of this.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Mhm.
Systems thinking.
System thinking, strategic thinking.
Yeah, I have to leave.
well, it's 5:51.
All
So
right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You wanna stop that share, Larry, please?
Pardon me?
Did you wanna stop the share?
I know.
So how?
Yeah, it should be a.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to do that.
Okay. And I'm excited pretty free all day.
Okay. Okay.
Do like a
Okay.
Zoom.
Well, thank you all for.
Thank you, Larry, very much. Appreciate it. So,
Thank you.
are there any other board comments? Anybody done it? Seeing none, all right, we will adjourn at 5:52. Thanks, everybody.
Are we convening to closed session
No.
or is that Tuesday?
No, we're gonna, it's gonna